I think it's useful to think of free speech, which you said is rare and honestly very abstract. And I think it's very difficult to get humans to buy into that abstract idea. It's helpful to think of it in terms of adaptive and maladaptiveness. So when is free speech adaptive and when it's not? And it obviously depends also on just the level that you're talking. Is it adaptive for you as a person in power? Mm-hmm. Is it adaptive for the whole society? And what's interesting is, we're speaking at a time when, the Russian invasion is looking like it's not going very well for Russia. Mm-hmm. And also things that are happening in China that looks, very heavy-handedness in terms of suppression of like COVID policies, lockdowns, but also not allowing people to talk about the problems that they're facing. They're going through food shortages, and they had to censor people complaining on Chinese Twitter, Weibo, because they don't want those problems to get leaked out. And what we're starting to see is kind of these authoritarian type leaders getting bad information. Mm-hmm. Whether it's Putin's military commanders giving him bad intel, oh, this was going to be an easy invasion, and him kind of, being completely blindsided by this, and Xi Jinping as well, right? And so you're starting to see there are global, because, free speech is really on the decline globally right now. And so, can you weigh in a bit on the global context and what it's saying right now about authoritarian countries that we're watching go through this?
Yeah. What you're saying is so perceptive, and it's one of the reasons why I'm a long-term optimist for freedom of speech, not necessarily a short-term one. But the reason why I'm a long-term optimist is because freedom of speech works really well. And what do I mean by that? There's something that I didn't know until I read Cass Sunstein's one of his many books, talking about this report that I believe was George Marshall commissioned right after World War II to try to figure out why was the U.S. on the winning side of the war? And one great thing in there that he points out is we have, even though there were restrictions during World War II, we had a comparatively free press that the Japanese Empire didn't have, that the Nazis didn't have, and of course, the Soviets didn't either, but the Soviets were an ally. And he points out this is a major advantage because you can openly talk about problems, and then you find out where the problems are, what those problems are, you get better information, and then you can actually fix things. Meanwhile, like in the Nazi system, it was just such a not just an evil system, but a deeply corrupt system where people were very afraid to point out anything was wrong to Hitler or any of his little sub-Nazis underneath them. And that's a real harm to try to run a society, is if you can't actually figure out what's wrong in the first place. So free speech actually has a lot of advantages to society, even beyond the obvious, like innovation and like scientific innovation. It's knowing legitimately like what is actually going on in society. I mean, which is my whole theory. I call it the lab and the looking glass theory of freedom of speech, that there's always value in knowing what people really think and why. And meanwhile, I wrote an article about this right at the beginning of coronavirus. Like, if you could imagine a situation in which China had a free press, I honestly think there's a good chance that it never would have gotten very far to begin with. Because as soon as you start having a mystery virus, clustered, I think we could have had a much more comprehensive response to it very early on if it hadn't been suppressed. So I think that there is a big disadvantage not allowing free speech in your society.